We have some stealthy solar storm launches and some fast solar wind that could give us some aurora just in time for Valentine's. Those stories and more are in this week's Spotlight. Space weather this week is calming down comparatively to last week. As we take a look at our Earth-facing disk, we have been saying goodbye to this cluster of regions that, if you remember last week, was giving us a lot of flare activity. But believe it or not, despite all the noise, we really didn't get any Earth-directed solar storms. In fact, all of the storming that we've been getting over the last week has been due to this boomerang-shaped coronal hole and the fast wind that it's been sending us. We're still dealing with that fast solar wind now, but it's going to be calming down here over the next couple days. But that's not the end of the story, because as you can see, we've got another coronal hole that's kind of rotating into the Earth strike zone. So we'll talk about that in a sec. Meanwhile, on the 9th, you can see this filament right here. Watch it as it launches. It looks like it's kind of at the lower end of the Earth strike zone right there as it launches. But when we take a look at it in coronagraphs, look at this wispy thing. There's hardly anything here. In fact, when we take a look at it in stereo's coronagraph, it's this really narrow kind of mini solar storm. So despite the fact that it's in the Earth strike zone, it likely is going to go south of Earth because it's just too small. And sadly, that's been the story this week. In fact, as we take a look across this coronal hole here, we had a stealthy solar storm that piggybacked off of a solar storm launch here. You can watch, boosh, there's a solar storm there. But we also had a little bit of a filament eruption in here that lifted off. And again, looking in coronagraphs, what do we see? Just this wispy looking thing. I mean, it's so anemic. It's kind of sad. So again, maybe a partially Earth-directed solar storm, but just convecting out with the solar wind, it's really not going to give us much of an impact. We may not even notice it if it hits us at all. And that seems to continue to be the story. We even had another filament up in this area in here, and late on the 11th into the 12th, that filament also erupts. You can watch it erupt right there. In fact, you can even see kind of a burn scar that covers all the way down in here. This whole area at high latitudes lifts off. But once again, look at this. Look at this thing in coronagraphs. It's just this wispy kind of thing right in here. So again, we're just not getting the big, strong solar storms, and it's kind of the same thing as last week. It looks like the main bulk of everything is going to be from this big coronal hole right here. This coronal hole, as it continues to rotate in through the Earth strike zone, is going to give us a pocket of fast solar wind that'll be just in time for Valentine's Day. So we could get some aurora, kind of similar to what we got over the last couple days. It's not expected to be big, strong storming, but we could reach G1 levels at mid-latitudes, possibly a little bit more storming at high latitudes. So you could get some decent aurora extended over the next few days, at least until this thing actually finishes its rotation through the Earth strike zone, because it's so elongated. Outside of that, though, we had a little bit that one filament actually launched in this area here. It's finally off, but now it's completely out of the Earth strike zone, so it doesn't even matter. We do have a few more regions that are going to be rotating into Earth view, but none of them seem to be all that flare active. You're going to watch the noise on the bands kind of quiet down a bit. As long as this region here, region 3992, behaves, we shouldn't see any more activity other than this fast solar wind. Switching to our moon, we are now coming out of a full moon and on our way to a third quarter. And by the 19th, the moon will still be about 60% illuminated. So you night sky watchers, if you want to catch those dim objects in the sky, like, I don't know, maybe some aurora from some fast solar wind, well, you're going to have this bright companion. So you're going to need to check your local rise and set times. Now, switching to our solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are anticipating that fast solar wind from that coronal hole that's rotating in through the Earth strike zone, but we are also anticipating that brush by from that filament launch that looks like it's going to go southward of Earth. So at high latitudes, NOAA is expecting major storm conditions. That's if we have that storm. We're definitely on a storm watch at high latitudes, but then we're going to be, as we move into the 14th, expect to be on a wind watch, because we're expecting that pocket of fast solar wind to pick back up again. Either of these could give us into G1 to G2 levels. In fact, NOAA's giving us about a 20% chance of a severe storm and about a 60% chance of a major storm over the next couple days from this fast solar wind at high latitudes. And then we will continue with the fast solar wind basically throughout the week because this is an extended pocket. So Aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, you definitely could get a very nice show here over the next few days, possibly in through Monday before things really calm down. Now, mid-latitudes, well, we're only expecting active conditions. Again, we're on a storm watch and then a wind watch after that. NOAA's expecting maybe 25% chance of minor storm levels at mid-latitudes, and that will calm down just a little bit as we move into the wind watch and then down into unsettled conditions by Saturday. So Aurora photographers, if you're at mid-latitudes, well, the best time to catch stuff is in right about on Valentines here in the States. By the time we get into the weekend, the Aurora shows may be over for you. So get out and get out early if you're going to chase. Switching to our solar flare and dayside radio blackout outlook over the coming week, we are sitting in the mid-160s right now for solar flux. This means that radio propagation on Earth's dayside is in the good range. We are dealing with moderate noise, though, on the dayside radio bands at Earth. NOAA's giving us about a 40% chance of M-class flares at the R1 to R2 level radio blackout, and that's likely going to last through Sunday before things may ramp up a little bit as we get another couple regions rotating into Earth view. And then we're only sitting at about a 5% chance for X-class flares. That's at the R3 level radio blackout. That should likely last through the rest of the week because we're not expecting a lot of really big flares, but we will expect as the week moves on, we should expect some returning regions to give us a little bit more noise. We also may see that solar flux ramp up near the end of that week. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, enjoy the respite because things should be reasonably quiet this week. That is, unless region 3992 ends up really ramping up activity. So let's hope it stays pretty dormant because that's what it's doing right now. So enjoy this week and enjoy the time off because the bigger flares will return. Now, switching to our radiation storm and polar aviation outlook over the coming week, everything is in the green this week. We are sitting at the D1 normal range. This is at flight level 360 for you aviators. It's also the S0 quiet range for everybody else. We should be getting a very low risk for radiation storms. NOAA's only giving us about a 1 to 5% chance of an S1 to S2 level radiation storm over the next 3 days, and I'm extending that out through the 5-day because it just doesn't look like we have any big flare players out there that are going to pose a risk for us. So all you aviators, and this includes flight crew and you high-risk passengers, enjoy this week of green because it looks like you're all in the clear. So the space weather this week is calming down when it comes to solar flare activity, but it's kind of similar to what we had last week when it comes to fast solar wind and aurora. Aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, well, you're in for a treat because we are expecting some glancing blows from some stealthy solar storms, but we also have that long pocket of fast solar wind from that extended coronal hole that's going to pass through this week. And if you're at mid-latitudes, well, you know that aurora could come down to mid-latitudes just in time for Valentines as well, but you're going to have to get out early before things calm down. Now, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, you know, those big radio blackouts have really kind of died down, as you've probably noticed. The bands have gotten a lot quieter, and that's going to last for easily, I'd say, about 5 to 7 days before we start getting some of those big regions rotating back into Earth view. We've definitely dropped that risk for radio blackouts down to a much more tolerable level. So be sure to enjoy that before things begin to ramp back up. And now you aviators and you flight crew, hey, everything looks good when it comes to the radiation storms as well. So even you guys are getting a little bit of a week off here. The only people that have to worry about things are GPS users because we do have that extended solar storming that's going to be happening on Earth's night side. It's not going to be all that intense, but it could get in the way of GPS reception, at least under the aurora and probably near dawn and dusk. And so be sure to be vigilant in those regions and also calibrate your magnetometers often. I'm Tamitha Skov, the Space Weather Woman. Thank you for watching.